We are on Kirk Cousins' watch. It does look like he is going to be released by the Atlanta Falcons. And if so, there is some speculation on some landing spots for Kirk Cousins. Zach Jackson of the Fan in Cleveland says that the Browns may add Kirk Cousins once he's released to reunite with Kevin Stefanski there in Cleveland. Obviously, they spent years together in Minnesota. They just traded for Kenny Pickett, and so yet another move that they've got to make because the quarterback they paid all that money to is no longer active for the next couple of months. So
that's interesting, though, to think how much cap space they have for Kirk, unless they feel like Kirk would do it for less.
He would have to do it for less, right? Who's going to pay him? What leverage does Kirk Cousins have today to leverage any of these teams?
Damn.
Everything's working against him. Outside of the need, and maybe Kevin Stefanski advocating to Andrew Berry for him, like, hey, he knows the system. I've got a good rapport with him. But he's got his age working against him. Obviously, some of the injuries, his play last year, all those things are working against him. And on top of that, his expense. He's going to be more expensive, most likely. At least that's the assumption. Again, maybe he's willing to take a discount to go there. And maybe that's where he's at. The other question becomes, like, Kirk Cousins has been, I don't want to say selective, but he's always made a decision that has been the best financial decision for him. Maybe you'd say also it's kind of worked out from a destination standpoint, right? Like he got drafted. You can't control that. Played under the franchise tag. That was how it worked out. And then instead of going to the Jets, he chose the Vikings, which I think we'd look at and say they've been a better organization. And that worked out to a degree. They went to the playoffs, but that was the end of that. And then he got the opportunity to go into free agency, and he signs with the Atlanta Falcons, which on paper last year, I think you would have said that's a good situation for a quarterback to go into. At least that was my thought about it, right? A winnable division, a roster with a ton of talent on it, and they committed big money. Felt like 2 years of guarantees, even though it somehow rolled into one. So I kind of look at it and go, is Cleveland that place? If he's not going to get paid what he wants,
no,
which is really what he's always done,
no,
is he going to go there?
No. To answer that question, if the question is posed that way, I would say that's a definitive no, because first of all, you do know that Deshaun Watson is still there. You do know that, and the presence of Deshaun Watson is going to be there regardless of his participation on the field. But it's also a very tough division to be in. And if I'm not getting paid what I want to get paid, why would I go into a division where I'm clearly trying to catch up from behind with what I'm doing here? I would think that Tennessee jumps out at me. And I got to be honest. If I were to go into the AFC North, I would want to do it with Pittsburgh, not Cleveland. And I'm not saying that because I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm just saying they just added DK Metcalf. I just think that with what they have offensively, tools-wise, their reputation and their body of work and what they're able to do, they're one of those teams that can beat Baltimore every year. They're one of those teams that can beat Cincinnati every year. They're one of those teams that can compete for an AFC North crown every year. So to me, if I were to do it, that would be one of the teams that I would look for, and I'd say, okay, if I'm not going to get paid exactly what I would want, I at least want to go to Pittsburgh because that market and that team could yield me a good return outside of the pay. But Tennessee would be number one on my list.
I would think he would prefer Cleveland just from the familiarity standpoint, and there's got to be a large portion of him that
even if you're not getting paid, though?
He's already been paid.
But what if you're trying to get paid again?
But if we're talking about leverage and he doesn't have any right now, he's also got to look at, he's staring his own mortality in the eyes and be like, all right, look, based on last year, the feeling is that I'm washed. And I want to prove that I'm not. So if it means I go to Cleveland, a place I'm familiar with, an offense and a coach that I'm familiar with, I'd rather do that than go to Pittsburgh, who may offer me more money and I've got to try and figure out new surroundings, a new coach, potentially a new system, like all of that
He's
stuff.
got to do that anyway.
But he's familiar.
I mean, I know you're familiar with what Stefanski's going to do, and you're familiar with him, but you still got to go into new digs, man. You still got, and that's in 2 years' time, right? Like, you had to do that you just had to do that. Now you got to do it all over again.
And also, we've seen, as long as it's not Deshaun Watson, we've seen several quarterbacks play pretty well under Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. And so if I was Kirk Cousins, I'd look at him and be like, man, I've made a ton of money. Like, this is about showing people I can still do this, and I'll go take my chances, and I'll take it with somebody that I know, and as opposed to somebody I don't know. That would be my thought.
Jerry Jeudy is the number one receiver for this team. Will we all agree on that? That's their biggest threat at the receiver's position, yes?
Yeah. And look, I like Jerry Jeudy.
I like Jerry Jeudy too. But if I'm looking at the supporting cast, I mean, I know we like Njoku.
Njoku's good.
I like Njoku. But
they have a hell of a running game. I mean, with Chubb and really their stable of backs.
They do have a running game. I don't trust it.
It's a great O-line.
I don't trust it in the North. And is this next stop? You got to believe this next stop also probably marks the end in terms of Kirk Cousins. If he does not do well, he's not going to be looked at as a starter in this league ever again. Outside of extreme circumstances, he's not going to get another opportunity to be a starter in this league.
So why not go to a place that you have that familiarity with?
I would say this, like from an offensive standpoint, and I say this all the time, if you know the verbiage of the system, that makes the transition a little bit easier. It doesn't make it like, oh, it's like riding a bike, which, by the way, my daughter, dude, she bit it so bad the other day, and she had like the training wheels on and stuff, and it wasn't even like that. She just went down this hill and was going too fast, and I was like, I'm like trying to chase her, and I'm like, you gotta use the brakes, and she just panicked, completely forgot right there on her handlebar. She could have used the brakes, didn't. So fell off, laid there like she was roadkill. We picked her up, dusted her off. She was fine, and now we've called her roadkill for the past 2 days. Which she's not
it's kind of crazy how kids can handle things like that.
Yeah.
Like, I would be done if I fell off of a bike. Oh, my body would be so sore off of a fall.
Yeah.
Like, I can't bounce back like that. Doesn't happen. Nope.
I mean, it wasn't that vicious of a fall, but she caught like a crack in the sidewalk where like there was one side was like uneven. So it was just kind of unfortunate. And
so you saw her go down.
Oh, dude, I was chasing her. I was like yelling.
All right. After you knew she was okay, did you laugh after?
I didn't laugh after. It probably took a little bit of time, but anyway, I don't want to get too far off track on this story.
But I just think stuff like that's kind of funny. Like, I would
trust me.
If she's okay, it's like now it's okay for me to laugh now that I know that you're okay.
The problem was like when I first walked up, I was like, okay, she's okay. But then she laid there like roadkill. So I kind of said, I was like,
put the chalk around.
So later on, like that was my first thought in my head. I didn't say it to her. But then I thought to myself, I'm going to call her roadkill at some point later on today.
Which one was it? Which daughter?
Tegan, my 6-year-old. Yeah.
Teagues.
Yeah, she's awesome. Anyway, the point is it's not like riding a bike where you hop back on and you're able to ride it much better than Tegan did, but it helps. And that's at this point in time in your career, it's huge because when you go to a different team, I can't emphasize this enough. And I played on a lot of different teams. One of the hardest things that you take for granted, especially when you're in college and you come in with a recruiting class and you're playing and throwing to guys that, at least back then, now it's a little more transient, but it's like you're kind of thrown to the same guys. And so you grow and you mature and you develop that chemistry together. It's really hard in the NFL to develop that in one off season in the pros. The off seasons are cut down now. Guys don't kind of work the same amount as they used to. It's a little more cut down with that approach. So you have a limited amount of time to develop that chemistry with like their body language. And there's a significant difference between how Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, All those guys, David Bell, how all those guys come in and out of their cuts. And in a league where when you're a quarterback, you are throwing balls before they're ever out of their cut, into their cut, to a spot. Like, you have to know based on the type of ball you need to throw, based on their pacing. Some guys are way better getting in and out of cuts. Like Jerry Jeudy, for example, can roll his cuts extremely well. He runs the way he's able to kind of run on the outside of his feet and the way he's able to juke guys and his start-stop ability, it's very abrupt. And so that's going to be something that like Kirk Cousins has to get used to. And like the smaller, like twitchy slot guys, man, you've had some guys sometimes that they were so good at being able to stop and then start and accelerate that you kind of had to get a feel for like how far out in front do I need to put this ball?
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's anticipation. Like you're watching him take off from the line of scrimmage. He's going to set up that defender based on his leverage. And so you're like, all right, he's got inside leverage. I know he's going to break out. But then it's a feeling with your feet and with your motion and with his body language as to when that's going to happen. And so that becomes a much more complicated process than people realize to get down. And when you're still thinking about how you call the play, what the play is called, what the concept is, it becomes a little bit daunting. And so last year when I was watching Kirk Cousins, who's coming off an injury, who's going to, a team with a new system, right? A first-time play caller and Zach Robinson and all these new pieces he's throwing to. It's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why he could have struggled, and he did struggle. And so you look at in Cleveland and go, okay, he's a year removed from the injury. That should help. And it's a system that he knows. That should help. Now it just comes down to like, can he develop chemistry with these guys fast enough if it is Cleveland, if he's going to be there? And that gives him, I think, to Jonas's point, a little bit better chance of having the success that he's hoping for.
I just think that going to Cleveland is super, super, super risky for Kirk Cousins. I get all of that, and maybe he does have a better opportunity of being successful in Cleveland because of the elements of awareness and understanding of the verbiage and the familiarity of the coach. I think that that's a tough situation to go into if I'm Kirk Cousins. I really do. Now, granted, they did win with who's my guy? Flacco. They did win with Flacco. And they had a little bit of
wacko
success.
For Flacco.
I mean, if Kirk Cousins believes he can go in there, and this is, in essence, the same type of team that Flacco was winning with, if he feels as though he can go in and be that guy, then maybe this is a big move, and the boom of it is really worth it. I mean, that's very possible. I just think that if I'm going to go take a chance right now, and maybe I've talked myself out of it, but I would just think that Tennessee would make the most sense. I think Tennessee would make the most sense because he has the opportunity to play against teams that aren't as competitive as the teams in the AFC North.